Okay, I'm Rob Caves with Becker and Polyakoff, and we serve as general counsel for the Community Association. I've done a number of things with the community, been in a number of meetings. As was stated, I was asked to come and talk about electronic voting. So we're going to talk about a couple general things with electronic voting, then talk about some specific services my firm offers, and then talk about some concerns regarding electronic voting. So the first thing to understand about electronic voting is it is specifically authorized by Chapter 720. Chapter 720, which is the Florida Homeowners Association Act that governs communities like yours, was amended in 2015 to authorize electronic voting by community associations. Electronic voting really didn't start until 2016. The statute goes into effect in July of each year, so it's really the next year that starts happening. The statute has a number of specific requirements for electronic votings, and the statutory section, if you want to go look it up later, is section 720.317, Florida statutes. And what it says is that the board may authorize the use of electronic voting. The board may not mandate the use of electronic voting. So if your board decides that for the next member's vote, whether that's voting to amend your documents or to authorize something or to elect the next round of directors, that is an option. It is not a mandate. The board cannot say you must vote electronically. The board must continue to allow owners to vote by proxy or to vote by written ballot, just like you've always done. Come to the meeting and vote, turn it in advance. None of that can go away by law. This is just a third way to participate. The other thing to understand about electronic voting is this is not email voting. This is not a situation where you send Jerry an email where the subject line says, "My vote," and then you write in the email, "I vote yes, sign your name." That's not this. What this is it's a service that is hosted by a service provider. Becker and Polyakoff is partnered with a technology company, and we have a service called BP Ballot. There are a number of other companies that offer this service. All of them, while they all have their own specific features and idiosyncrasies, are essentially the same thing. What it is, it's a website that you pre-register with through the association by giving them your email address. Then using that email address, you are verified and you're given a specific unique password. And then during the period of time when voting is allowed, you log in with that uniquely assigned password, and it shows your name and address and your parcel, and you vote on whatever the questions are, and you submit that vote. And it's on a website, and then the association has another website that they log into at the time of the election or the meeting that shows them the results of that electronic vote. Now, there's a number of specific statutory requirements that any platform that offers electronic voting must comply with. The first is you have to be able to register and check that you're actually going to be able to vote before the voting goes live. You have to be allowed to, get your password, get your email address in, log on to the website, see that it works before the voting is live. The system also must be able to separate your unique identification from your vote for the directors. It has to be able to track that, but then separate it so no one can see who you voted for with respect to the election of directors. Other votes do not have to be secret by law, but they can be set up to be secret. But for the election of directors, by statute, it must do that. By statute, it must create a record that can be verified and inspected just like any other record of the community after the election. So the association is given that information and has to maintain it, and the service provider, regardless of who it is, has to be able to do that. Store that so there can be recounts, that sort of thing. So that's the technical specifications. The statute does not specifically talk about what internal security controls have to be maintained. It just says these things have to be kept confidential, they have to be kept secret. You have to have an ability to separate this information under certain circumstances. So I cannot speak to any other provider's specific security and encryption protocols in complying with the statute. What I can say with respect to Becker and Polyakov and the service that we provide is that it is the same level of encryption and obtains the same certifications that internet banking platforms use. So online credit card payments or online account transfers, that type of encryption is the encryption that the service we use and partnered with is certified to comply with. My understanding is that other providers have similar levels of encryption. Again, if the association moved forward with another provider, which we don't have a problem with, and we'll assist them in setting that up as well, we'd want to verify what their security controls are. So there are the same type of encryption that internet banking uses is what our service uses, and my understanding is kind of the industry standard with respect to security. As with any level of security, the concern is always at the user end. So if you give someone your email address or your password and they use it, that would obviously be a problem. The key control that we use is we get the email address from you, and we have to know it is from you. And we put controls in the sign-up process to ensure that, John Smith, owner of Lot 101, is the John Smith that gave us this email address for Lot 101. So there are, real-world security controls on top of the encryption online security controls. So that's kind of the focus of security that we do. Currently, if you go online to look up information about BP Ballot, some information is currently online, but they're taking everything down June 1st for an upgrade that goes live in September. So after this, if you go look it up and you can't find much information about that service, that's why. It'll all be upgraded come September. There's a few procedural issues to understand with respect to electronic voting from the association side. And this would apply with regardless of what service provider you use. The board cannot just, at a regular board meeting, meaning 48 hours posted notice board meeting, decide to use electronic voting. The board meeting where electronic voting is authorized is a board meeting that requires 14 days mailed and posted notice, similar to other actions that require that type of notice. So there'd have to be a board meeting that gets special notice before it could go live with electronic voting. That has to be done early enough before an election or a vote that you can register, verify your computer works with the platform, etc. So, just making up stuff, haven't had this conversation with the board about even proceeding, but say you wanted your next annual meeting in March to use this, you would want to get the ball rolling in the fall so you had plenty of time to make it work. Again, and I just want to stress this again, is that it's an option. The statute does not permit the association to mandate any one vote in a particular manner. So if the board were to move forward with it, it would just be another way you can vote. You cannot be forced to do it that way. For that to happen, the statute would have to be amended substantially. I have never not heard of any appetite from the legislature to do that. So if the association were to move forward with it, it would be an option. If the association were to elect to move forward with it, they can use it at a meeting and they don't have to authorize it again. They have that as a kind of standing authorization after you have that one board vote with 14 days notice. The other requirement in the statute is that any electronic voting process has to comply with your governing documents provisions for elections and member voting. Fortunately, your documents with respect to election of directors follow very similar to what the Condominium Act requires in the election of directors, which means you have advanced notice, advanced nomination, a closed period when nominations have to be received, and then you use secret ballots. Very similar to how condominiums vote. And that's very consistent with using this process because you're not taking nominations from the floor of the meeting where the election is held like some associations do. So in my opinion, your documents are consistent with doing this type of voting. So I don't see a legal impediment to doing it. Ultimately, like so many things, it is a business decision for the association and the board to make in determining what is in the best interests of the association. Personally, I'm agnostic to some degree on how you vote as long as we do it right. Practically, I have attended every election you've had since turnover. You have a great group of volunteers who come out at those elections and count all that paper, and they do a wonderful job. But practically speaking, your community, in my experience, and now I'm stepping away from the legal issue and just talking about from my personal experience, associations of this size and of this nature, you have relatively affluent. Everyone's got internet access. Everyone's got a computer, except for probably a diminishing percentage of people. My guess, in my experience, is the first time you do it, you'd probably get 30% participation. The third time you do it, you'll have 85% participation. Everyone just realizes it's a lot easier. It saves time and money on both ends. When you sign up for this, you can also agree to get notice by email. So all that paper you get in the mail is now going to be emailed to you if that's what you choose. So it saves the association from having to mail out all those documents to those people that are going to vote electronically. One of the things our service provides, speaking about getting things electronically, is when you go to vote, whether you're voting on the election of directors or on a question like amending your documents, the person's biography that they turned in that was mailed out with the ballots is going to be in the system that you can click on and read it and refresh your memory that, oh, that's that person, not this person. Or if you're being asked to vote on amendments, the amendments will be there as a link you can click on and read them again as you vote. So it just saves a lot of paper. Again, if you choose to get your notices electronically. So I think you'll see that there's some efficiencies that are created both on the association side and then just owners getting less paper in the mail from the association. I have a number of clients that do this. Here in Southwest Florida, the firm has had multiple hundred of these elections through our system. They are, like everything, there's hiccups at times, and I can't say that every one of those votes has gone off 100% perfectly. The last one I attended was here in Fort Myers, was a condominium association with about 800 units total. And they had about 70% participate by the electronic voting. And it makes that process a lot more efficient because those numbers just appear in a spreadsheet on your laptop. And then you count the remaining, 25 or 30 paper ballots and you add them together and it tells you how the vote goes. So I've found that a lot of associations, once they go through the process once or twice and understand, how it mechanically works, find it, very positive. But at the end of the day, I think the board has to make the decision on whether, that's a good fit for your community. If they do, there are the controls in place, and we would work with the board in putting out the resolution and having the board properly authorize that voting. And if they choose not to, we'll handle your vote like we've handled it the last 3 or 4 years. So that's kind of my overview. Don?
How do you collate the two voting types together when you're at the evening of the election?
Sure.
when you're getting the results?
Right. So at the time of the election, one thing to understand is the election of directors is done a little bit differently than all other votes because with regards to the election of directors, those votes cannot be opened until the meeting. So the association doesn't get any information about how that vote is done until the meeting when that information is then released by the software. And it comes to the association in a spreadsheet. And what it does is it shows you all the electronic votes you received, and then you take that to another spreadsheet where you add in the in-paper votes, and then it tells you what the total is. So you track it all in the system, and you tell them, these are the votes that were cast in person or by paper. The system automatically autofills the votes that were done online, and then you get the total. So you get one document at the end that has all the votes, one tally sheet. And then obviously, like everything else, we keep keep all of the records that were received.
So that you would input the addresses of those who've submitted a paper ballot the night of the election into the system?
No, we wouldn't, we would just submit the totals. So you would keep all of your regular checklists, like we do when the check-in tables that say, did you vote already? Are you voting here? All that would be kept just in paper but then the totals would be what you would enter into the system to tell you what the results are.
Yeah, what's confusing to me is how we know those that voted online by address, I
Right.
assume, and then these that are turning in paper
Well,
ballots.
yeah, we would have that information so you can confirm, and the online voting can be turned off before the meeting. So we would say the cutoff for online voting is 5 p.m. on Monday, the meeting's 5 p.m. on Tuesday. We get the list of everyone who's voted. We don't know how they voted, but we
No.
just know they voted.
Right, by address, and you
Right.
add these to it, and they're
Exactly.
checked off too.
Right.
Okay, I understand
Right.
that. Thank you.
If the association was going to go with electronic voting and go with your company, approximately what would the cost be?
The cost of just the system, so this is not legal services in contemplation of the vote and whatever else we do, but just the system itself, the current pricing is $375 an event. So if you had an election of directors and another vote on amending your documents, that's just a total of $375. Again, I haven't been told that the pricing is or isn't changing with the upgrades, but that's the current number as of today. Yes, sir.
What are we currently paying in your time for the time that it takes to sit there and physically count all the paper ballots in our current system?
More than $375.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
yeah. Like, yeah, you'll probably save that in paper alone. That's setting aside, the time that you spend, at the meeting. I think you'd probably save it in postage and paper.
I remember with the voting, last time we talked about having, I'm sorry. Thank you. I knew he was sitting next to me for a good reason. By telephone conference, we talked about having all of the ballots sent to your office.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was assumed with the number of man-hours involved, this was going to cost several $1,000s, which is why the association, the board decided not to spend several $1,000s doing it that way. But this $375 seems like a reasonable price, and also it could be very efficient after everybody got used to using it.
Sure. Yeah, I think the key is setting that up as a process with the long view, because there will be growing pains to set it all up and get it initially going. Obtaining all the email addresses, creating the master spreadsheet of email addresses, et cetera, et cetera. But I think once you have it going, it's kind of a perpetuating process. People are accustomed to providing you their email addresses. You get them when they come in. You get them to sign up when they are new members, et cetera. And then the board, the association staff, and the members learn to use the program, whatever program it is, to vote. So I think you will see that. Yes, sir.
Rob, would it be safe to say that with that cost of $375, and I'm a big proponent of having the ballots mailed to you and getting them off-site, if we did it that way and had the electronic voting, would it be safe to say that it would still cost less than we currently pay for the system we have now?
I don't know. I don't know what you pay now. I think you'll save money on postage if I'm at the meeting and it goes an hour shorter, it's $350 right there. The issue with having my office obtain the ballots is there were a number of concerns I raised, and if the board elects to do it, we would do it. One is, are you going to still allow members to drop off their ballots in person here? And now you have ballots being received in two places, and I'm not sure what benefit you get out of that. If you're not going to allow them to drop it off here, I think that is in and of itself a potential problem. But then if my office is receiving them, we have to verify that that ballot is from an owner at an address in Sandoval, and that just is going to take time, depending on what person is doing that verification would ultimately determine what the cost of that would be. So, but if, you know, that was the process put in place, but 80% of your votes were cast online, you're talking about a much smaller universe of paper to deal with, regardless of who's dealing with it.
Rob, the rollout process, knowing that we have 1425 resident doors here, and that is an in-person registration, am I correct?
We can set that up a number of ways. We can do it in person, requiring them to come in. There's a form that we use that we would send out with the notice that would have to be returned by the member that includes their information, their email address that they're using that is then subsequently verified. But we can put additional controls on that they have to return that in person if we wanted to do it that way, and they're checked off on the list, you know, verifying that they're the owner. We can ultimately set that process up to be customized to the association, you know, to resolve whatever concerns you have.
How long of a process do you feel, how long will it take for us to get if we do this, to roll it out completely, so that, knowing we have a lot of snowbirds that come in?
Well, I think given your seasonal residency and number of people, I would advise you to give yourself, you know, 2 or 3 months to try to get everything in place so you're not rushing before an election. So assuming that there's no member vote between now and the next annual meeting, I think it would make practical sense, given that you have to do a 14-day mailing to authorize the process anyway, you know, to look at some date in the fall to kick it off and then spend that time getting all of the consents and email addresses from the owners that want to use it.
In your other associations, undoubtedly you have some with the approximate size that we are. How have you found that they have achieved the goals successfully? Have they done it through mailings, or has it been a combination of mailings and actual appearance at the office?
They've done a number of things. You know, you have to mail everything to everybody when the statute is going to put that on you. The associations that have been most successful, in addition to mailing everything out, they have the materials available in the office. They've done town halls where, you know, we can come and do an exhibition if you want us to do that. Again, that would have to be after September. And they've, you know, provided information in a number of ways, and they've seen that growth of participation from the first round to the subsequent rounds is where you really see, you know, the highest levels of participation.
Any more questions?
Are you taking them from the audience?
Are we taking questions?
Is there any downside to this thing, or what about the issue of hacking, that kind of thing, and
Well,
any other downside?
As I said before, you know, the system we use has encryption that's similar to what internet banking used. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, if Vladimir Putin sticks his St. Petersburg troll farm on you, he's going to break the system. It's just going to happen. Short of that, you know, I think there's probably a higher level of fraud potential in either people acquiring other people's emails in some nefarious way, or, you know, the paper system being misused, whether it's people submitting ballots for other owners, changing ballots when, you know, they get them and turn them in for other people, whatever, getting lost in the mail. I think the association has done a very good job of putting controls in place to prevent duplicate voting. Similar controls electronically exist, but sure, I mean, it's a human-made system, and no human-made system is infallible. I think that, you know, the security protocols and the encryption protocols that are pervasive in the industry now, which piggyback off of the financial institution encryption, is, you know, I think is reasonably as secure as you can expect to be. You know, I have never heard of anyone having that type of problem with this type of voting, whether it's with our system or any other system. I would also state, while I'm not an expert in this area, I can only imagine the number of felonies that would be involved to successfully do that. So, you know, is it possible? Absolutely. Is it likely? In my opinion, no. But who knows? No. Yes, sir.
I was curious if the 375, you stated that was per balloting,
Per meeting, basically.
Okay, if we're in forming many committees, and I can see where some opinion balloting would be quite useful to us, can that be worked out? Is there a different charge because there's no legal opinion?
Well, the 375 is the cost to have the system set up to, hold a vote. That's not, a legal opinion being provided. If you're taking votes that are not statutorily mandated or required by your documents, opinion polls, I think you could do that with internal mechanisms that are less secure. I'll give you some free legal advice. I am anti-opinion polls because they create expectations. If you want to vote on something, vote on it. But, asking members to state their opinion in a non-binding manner, I think creates expectation problems when the board determines that the best interest of the association may be something differently. But if the board wants to, authorize those types of votes, we could, explore how you would do that if doing it through the electronic voting system is not, feasible.
All right, any other questions?
Gentleman
Please
in the
come
back.
to the microphone so that we can hear for the folks that are listening online.
Good evening. So, in situations where you've had electronic voting, you said that the rate of use of electronic voting increases, but what about the participation rate? That is,
That's
are more people voting
right.
because they can do
I think generally yes, but participation is a very community-specific issue. Apathy versus those that participate. I do think you see increased. I would expect to see a marginal increase in the level of participation. I would say that Sandoval experiences a pretty healthy rate of participation compared to a lot of other clients, so that might not be a huge jump. But I would expect that you would see some marginal increase. I'd be a little surprised if you didn't see an increase of some rate.
Thanks, and thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy?
Kathy. They're trying to put you out of a job.
I know. I'm going to take it off. Since I'm short, over and above the 350, what would that be? I mean, I know it's subjective, I guess.
No,
but
the 375, the cost, the fee for BP ballot to set up and hold a vote is a fixed fee at 375. So that would be the cost of doing electronic voting through our system. That obviously does not include any time that I have with respect to the legal work that we do for the association, whether it's attending the meeting, providing opinion, drafting amendments, et cetera. But the cost of the service to do the electronic vote, that's just a per meeting charge.
Okay, so if you were at the meeting for 3 or 4 hours, that's still,
That's still at my
Yeah.
hourly rate.
yeah,
And hopefully we're there for less time.
yeah. Now, the other question I have is for people who still want a paper vote. You
Absolutely.
would still have to come in here.
Yes.
And you have to have a system set up.
Yes.
What happens to those votes? Are they still put in a lockbox?
Yeah,
Are they sent to you? Do you
Well, that would
open
be
them?
ultimately determined by the board on how we do that. But essentially, none of that has to change. Owners still have the right to vote in paper, vote by proxy, and you could still have the exact same process that you have now for those owners that want to vote that way. And this is just another option. So when you come to the meeting, there would still be some number of paper ballots that the volunteers would have to, verify and count and collate, and then you'd have the numbers from the online system that we'd have to
And
put
then how
together.
do you put the two together? Because,
Well, we would still have a list that we're checking off of those owners that are turning it in paper. And then you get a list of those owners that have voted electronically, and we can verify that there's not any duplicate votes.
and is that done the night of the voting?
That can be done as we go. We won't get tallies on how the vote goes, but you would know who has voted, so you can verify that you're not getting a second, ballot, and still have the master checklist like we've always had. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
back to what Doug Willett said before, I mean, Rob, you referred to Putin and his elections. That's a little bit different than this mom and pop election that we're talking about. Can you definitely guarantee us that
No,
your system?
no. I cannot guarantee it cannot be hacked. No one can. Is it likely? In my experience, no. I mean, but if you use, again, the analogy I use, because this is the encryption that is used, is internet and online banking. The type of encryption that electronic and automatic funds transfer uses to protect it is the same type of encryption that our service uses. Most services in the industry use similar encryption.
I believe a lot of residents had that as an issue with them, so that answers the question.
Yes, sir.
How does the system you have account for residents that may have registered but moved since the election day?
Well, that is going to be the same way, we would account for that the same way we account for paper ballots that are cast by owners that are not owners on the date of the election. It has to be verified that the owner list is up to date as of the date of the election, and any improper votes would have to be discarded.
So the system will be accurate to the day of the voting?
Right.
For owners that live?
Yes.
The community on the day of the vote?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Which is the same as, and to be clear, accurate as of the records of the property appraiser, which is what is used now.
I don't think you can expect anything better than that, right? Okay.
Sir?
Would you say that electronic voting is any less secure than paper ballot voting?
No, I mean, I think it's reasonable to argue it's more secure because the process is controlled from start to finish, and there is not a period where, the ballots are, out in the ether. I mean, under best case scenario, they mail them to an owner, the owner fills them out and drops them off, but some ballots arrive in other ways. And I have no facts or knowledge that anyone has acted untoward with respect to ballots that have been turned in, but I think electronic voting has an extra level of security.
Are there any other
All right.
questions? Then let's thank Rob for the
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.